I've got a great panel here. We'll have them introduce themselves here in a minute. And we're going to tell you a story today. A story backed up by facts from the FM industry. So it'll be a quick, eventful presentation. So learning objectives wrapped around the story will be understand the impact FM training can have on staff retention, identify the 24 knowledge areas and skills that encompass the FM skill set, contrast the top training priorities of FM managers and staff, and discuss the implications of training with an expert panel. So with that, here's the path we're going to take. Here's the path this story is going to take. So we'll do introductions here in a minute. So why is training important now? And again, I'll talk to you about this survey we did. We got this feedback from the industry. So this is from you guys. So what knowledge and skills do FMs need, and what impact can FM training have? And obviously we'll do Q&A at the end, but please, again, if you've got questions along the way, please interrupt us and ask those questions. We'd be happy to field them as we go. So what I'd like to do, Dan introduced me. I'm the VP of Global Business Development for ProFM. I have overall responsibility for design, development, and distribution of the ProFM program. And with that, I'd like to have our panel introduce themselves and talk about their entree into FM and their roles now.
Products. So I'm happy to be with you here today.
All right, thanks, Eileen. And I'm going to go out of order, so I'll have Jess go next.
All right, my name is Jessie Bickel. I'm the Facilities Coordinator for Reece Group USA. And I joined facilities management entirely by accident, as most people I think do. But I've been in the industry for probably about 13 or 14 years now. And I coordinate the facility services for the portfolio in the U.S.
Great. Thanks, Jesse. And then John.
Good morning. John Hajduk, Executive Director with Sodexo. So Sodexo is an integrated facility management provider. Spend most of my time on a Procter & Gamble account in North America. Run a portfolio of sites, notably one in West Virginia. It's a new site. It's around 6 million square feet under roof. We have about 4,000 employees there. I've been doing this FM gig for the better part of coming up on 25 years here. Variety of roles, everything from electrician, janitorial supervisor, different hard service supervisory roles, client side, consultant side, and now on the service provider side. So nice to see everyone this morning.
So what I'd like to do is revisit the panel here, and let's talk about what your outlook on the FM industry is for the upcoming year. And what are teams facing, your teams and others? And I'll start with John on this one.
Yeah, so we're getting back to normal at this point in time. Interestingly enough, the sector that I work in was critical manufacturing, so we never shut down through COVID. We actually ramped up to keep the sites operational. Everything from 2-hour sanitization to temperature screening during the pandemic, and now we're getting back to business as usual. So a lot of change with staffing levels, and a lot of challenges with recruiting and employee retention. I think there's a lot of churn in different core businesses as well as FM, whether you're in the client or service provider side. And I think that will continue as we get into 2023, and hopefully things will start to stabilize. Just a lot of movement, again, both with businesses and employees. I'm sure you're all experiencing that now as well, where you have employees that retired, you have employees that are taking better opportunities as everything sorts itself out.
Great, thanks, John. Jesse?
My company is actually in the mother of all growth spurts, I think, and so what we are experiencing is trying to pivot our team and the tools and resources that our team has to be able to accommodate that growth spurt at the speed the company is moving. And our challenges internally are making sure that we have those tools, we deploy those tools, and we get those tools aligned fast enough to meet the demand. But I think that is also very similar to the challenge that FM is having as an industry, where the technological development, the spotlight on this industry is such that we have gone from being the people behind the curtain that keep the facilities going to being in that spotlight. And being able to pivot that industry and that knowledge fast enough to meet the audience is interesting.
Great. Thanks, Jesse. And Eileen.
So I think that if you're and no one in this audience appears to be at the beginning of their career, but if you are, it's an excellent time. And if you have people that are reporting to you who are in the younger generation, to foster as much learning, training, education as you can give them, because they really are the future of the industry. If you're mid-career, you're in high demand, and it's a wonderful time to see where your career is going to go, because you'd be very hard to replace wherever you are right now. And in facility managers that I talk to and ask them how they're doing and how they're planning their career trajectory, many of them have told me that before pandemic they might have been looking to change to do something else, and several of them indicated that their companies made them an offer they could not refuse to stay, that their talent was such in demand and they needed them, and they wanted them not only to stay, but to help them build and grow the facilities management department. And the facility management and human resources and the board are talking quite a bit now. And in my history coming up through working with the International Facility Management Association, there was 20 years of discussions of would facility managers ever be able to get close enough to report to the board. And you know what? It happened. And now it's the CFO, the CEO, and the chief of human resources, the facilities people, having this great open dialogue. So great future immediately, right ahead.
So I'm going to dig into some data points now from an annual survey that we do here at ProFM. So we believe it's important annually to invest back and understand what the industry is facing in terms of challenges, what they're facing in terms of training and recruiting people. So we are going to share some data from the 2022 FM Training Outlook survey. In terms of who answered this, we do this globally on an annual basis, and we got responses from 30 unique countries this year. 63% were from U.S., 37% doing simple Minnesota math there. Outside the U.S., 79% of folks that responded managed one or more staff, and then 62% had 11 plus years experience. So what I'd like to do is throw it back to the panel, and let's talk about why is FM training so important now. So, and I'm going to actually move ahead, and I'm going to ask you guys a question next. So, and we don't have any fancy technology up here to poll everybody, so we're going to do the really informal way of raising your hand. So, do you have open positions on your facility management team today? So from a show of hands. So we're about half or so. Does that seem about right? About half back there? Yep, that's good. Okay, so that's pretty consistent with what the survey told us. So of the employers that answered, so the folks that manage people, 54% of employers expect to have open positions this year. And the reasons for those are people are looking to move. So they're looking at opportunities at other companies. Second, we've talked about, this came up a couple times already in the panel, this kind of looming retirement thing. You know, I've been in and around facilities since 2009, and this has been a topic since 2009, this kind of looming retirement issue that we may have. I think that was accelerated and exasperated through the pandemic, through COVID-19, and so that continues to be a big issue. But if you look at the number one there, they're losing staff to other employers. And then they're growing and they need more staff. And then if we look at folks that have considered leaving, so this is individuals that have considered other places to go. So 66% of our respondents said they've considered leaving or have left a position in the past year. We're going to hear from Jessie here in a minute. She's in that camp. So she, within the last year, joined Reece Company, and there's some significant reasons why she did that. And it aligns completely with this. So when you think about why folks choose to stay with an employer, so increase, more money, better benefits is always a factor. But number two, opportunities for professional development and training. Really important, all right? Invest back in the people. And then internal advancement. Can I progress in my organization? 79% of employers are struggling to find skilled talent. So there continues to be a knowledge, skills, and abilities gap out there since folks can't find them. So let's go to our panel and let's talk about how is employee retention impacting FM teams and entire organizations, and then what can managers do to retain that talent? And I'll start with Jesse on this one.
So within the past year, I left my role as a facilities administrator, and I joined Reece Group as a facilities coordinator. And what was very interesting is that I did not apply for that job. I had somebody come to me offering, hey, that we have this open role, you should take a look at it. I hadn't actually even been looking to transfer. By the time I accepted that position, I was in negotiations with 3 different companies in 3 different states in the U.S. And it was the first time in my career that I had really had companies almost competing to have me join their team. As facilities managers, I was used to being considered a cost center. But after COVID, I think, and after the spotlight on the value that FM brings to keeping companies running and keeping them operational, it was being seen as a strategic resource instead. It was being seen as a solution. I selected Reece Group because the way they treated facilities was, this building is part of our brand. Yes, the people in our company perform their operations, but they can't do that if the building doesn't support their success, which is very, very similar to my mentality and my definition of what FM is. But not only did they bring to that offer compensation, they, in the offer letter, said, we have a training budget, we are invested in your professional growth, we're invested in your education, and they made it very clear that not only are they looking for an employee who can come in and fix whatever problem they have today, but they're looking for someone they can invest in who can then invest that talent back into the company.
Great. Thanks, Jesse. John?
So I'm going to give you a little bit of a different example. The large site that I help run in West Virginia, we had an attrition rate during COVID and in the beginning of this year of about 30% month on month. One of the areas where we had the highest turnover was in janitorial. Huge site, a lot of travel time, high expectations, and this was after adjusting pay quite a bit over the last 2 years. So even with a bit above market pay, we were still having attrition. So we decided to do something a bit different. We invested in our employees. Every employee, from frontline janitors to supervisors to managers, and what was interesting, in a matter of about 6 months, we had internal managers and supervisors that were promoted. And to me, that really speaks to the value of employee engagement and training. What we learned was the reason people were leaving wasn't just because of pay. It was more so they wanted somebody to believe into them. They wanted to believe in something. And it made a huge difference. We were not managing downward anymore. The group was somewhat self-managing. We introduced a bunch of technology for our janitorial team, smart restrooms, a system called Trax, which is great if you've ever seen it. A lot of other equipment, brought tenant in. And we had a job like, and let's be honest, janitorial work is not sexy, right? It is not. For those of you that have either done it directly, supervised, managed a group of folks, it stinks. It's not fun. So our janitors went from using mops buckets to using state-of-the-art equipment, having analytics to figure out when, where to go and clean the restrooms, and the way that they would get dispatched and document their service was on tablets, just like this. And one of the best examples was a gentleman, Johnny. He is Korean, and in his early 60s, he was able to adopt that technology and become a trainer. And the reason I believe that is because he wanted to. It made him feel more valued. And with that, the other piece that I'll transition and pivot to what we're talking about here today, we did similar initiatives then with the new supervisors and managers. And those individuals were frontline employees or entry-level supervisors 6-8 months ago. And now they're running an operation, and I will argue one of the best run operations I've ever seen. So whenever you look at how you can retain and attract employees, you have to be competitive, but it's not all about money. There's other factors with it. People want to come to work and do a good job. but we have a role to play there as well. We need to give them the tools and we need to give them the support, and part of that is giving them a career path.
All right, good. Thanks, John. And Eileen, love to get your perspective on this one.
I just think that hearing those types of stories supports what the research says, that across industries, if you support people and you provide training, you will have retention. And we know that the second most expensive thing is you're working, I should say, the people and the real estate. So you want to keep your people so you can run your real estate. That's the core of FM today.
So back to the survey, back to data here. So 86% of employers say there's a gap between the skills their team needs and what they have today. So almost 90% said there's a skills gap here. So at 86%, just incidentally, comparing that to 2021, to the 2021 results, it's down a little bit, so it's 5% down. So in 2021, that number was 91%. Still high though, right? 85% of staff say they could use more FM knowledge and skills for their current job, okay? And then we're gonna go back to you and poll you again. So does your organization have a training budget set aside for FM staff? Okay, so I would suggest that's about 30%, right? Am I doing math right, Nicole, back there? Is that pretty close? All right. So what did the survey tell us? Well, the survey told us that 57% of employers plan to implement FM training in 2022. Now, keep in mind that 86% said there's a gap, okay? But only 57% of those employers say that they plan on implementing training in 2022. 60% of employers provide funding for staff to pursue FM training or credentials, okay? 86% said there's a gap. 60% provide funding for that. And then 47%, less than half, of FM managers have been encouraged by senior leadership to pursue FM training for themselves and for their staff. Okay? So we're going to go back to the panel, and we're going to talk about this question. So given this talent shortage and the need for training, why isn't training a higher priority for employers? And Eileen, we'll start with you on this one.
So it should be a higher priority, we know that, and then they look at all the new things that they may need to implement. And a lot of budget was eaten up by new initiatives they had to take in terms of people coming into the building, installing sensors, counting who's there, putting in new software. There was this kind of urgency to get all this new technology very quickly, and a lot of that technology backed directly into the facilities budgets. So there needs to be a separation between, what do we need to do for the existing people versus what do you need to do with, to your role, saying we're bringing in technology. So looking at the whole budget and saying how much of it has to go to get the people up to speed and to offer them more training. But part of the training situation is that sometimes the facilities leadership are left to their own devices. Where are they going to get this training? It's like, oh, there's training in the budget. Where do I go? The senior facilities person is so very busy. And now it's that where do I go for that information? Now, hopefully they're coming to the websites of the industry, and they're going to the professional organizations, and they're coming to NFMT, and they're coming to the extra trade shows. But part of it is that there has to be some relationship, I would think, with the human resources professionals to say, where do I go for this training? And then, here we have an example of getting people into the ProFM. And how do you do that? Is it hard? Is it difficult? Do I need to take it to make sure that I get my ProFM and then figure out who on my staff should be getting it? And I think part of it is that facilities people are really busy. They need the resources. And many county colleges, of course, are offering facility management training and programs. That's a good place to start. And what we would certainly like to do is to see the credential be something people could use at the end of their 2-year period in a county college environment where they're training facilities management and say, well, I have this degree, but now what? Well, you could get a full-on professional certification. So that's kind of where it needs to go.
Great, thanks, Eileen. And Jesse.
I think one of the challenges with employers, that number not aligning, where you have such a high percentage that understand the need for training, but not quite matching that percentage that are willing to provide funding, is I think there are still a lot of companies that don't understand what all facilities is and does. or they don't understand not only the complexity, but the workload. It's very easy to simplify this down into just numbers. Oh, you dispatch work tickets, or you clean restrooms, or you do this, or you do that. But to fully understand the complexity and the dynamics and the challenges that FM faces is a conversation that needs to be had in order to say, we are a strategic resource. We are an investment in your company and in your success. And therefore, all of these things that we do does need training. We do need to get our people up to speed, not only on the technical skills, but on other soft skills, management training, communications, project management, things that don't typically get directly associated with the person who's, walking the hallways in their uniform, performing whatever break-fix task somebody has asked of them at that exact second in time. So there needs to be a conversation that introduces FM in all of its complexity and in all of its value to these employers to make them understand why it's necessary. Great.
Thanks, Jess. John?
So my answer is going to be really blunt and to the point. We don't manage our business well. I think that historically, FM has been looked at as an expense or cost center and a necessary evil. As a result of that, if you step back and think about the dollars that we spend every year, whether it be subcontractors, employees with benefits, does it really not make business sense to invest a few % of that budget to develop our staff, to retain our staff? It absolutely does. We need to be better leaders. We need to push back more to our leadership, challenge them on what we're doing. And, I heard a comment here earlier about time. We don't have time. I got to tell you, in the last year, I have more time than I ever had in my role. And the reason for that is I have individuals at lower levels performing the work that I used to do, and quite frankly, they do it better. So, what I challenge each and every one of you to do is take a look at, where you're spending your money, where you're spending your time. Does that really make sense? We really need to challenge the paradigm, and we need to build our teams up from the bottom to the top. The most effective team is one where you have decisions being made at the lowest level, and those individuals feel empowered to make that decision. But we got to give them the right tools. And those tools are everything from equipment to training.
So safe to say, panel, let's hire folks that have abilities, right, and potential, and coach them up, right? Let's coach them up and get them functioning really well from the bottom up. So we've established that there's, people are moving around. They're looking to move around. There's retirement looming. There's folks looking for different jobs. We've established that based on the survey and the data in the survey that there's an issue with the skills gap out there. So let's dig in and let's talk about what those skills are. So what knowledge and skills do FMs need? And I think this is a point that Jessie just raised in when she was talking about the last question, that do you folks struggle with how to describe your job to someone not an FM? Do you struggle with that? Show of hands, please. Okay, so to some degree that is true. Okay, so I'm gonna shift gears a little bit, and I'm gonna talk about specific skills kind of wrapped around this ProFM body of knowledge that we have put together here at ProFM. So in 2017, we spun off this organization called the Professional Facility Management Institute. We went out and recruited large organizations and industry leaders to help us define what was needed in the industry from a knowledge, skills, abilities, and behaviors situation for facility managers today and into the future. So to effectively do that, like I talked about earlier, if you really want to know, you got to go ask. So you got to go ask the market, what do they do on a daily basis, and what are those skills needed? So we did a very comprehensive and very broad survey to really go out to the broad industry globally and understand that. So we surveyed over 10,000 individuals. We got about 30% response to that, which if you've done any survey work, that's very good response. It was a very lengthy survey to determine all the kind of factors and all the skills needed. 40% of those came from outside the U.S., spread across 93 different countries. I think it's really interesting that there were over 1,200 unique job titles and roles. So, there's many ways to describe the FM, right? So there was over 1,200 of those respondents had different job titles, and it was over 1,800 unique companies that responded to this. And overwhelmingly, they came back with what you put out there in terms of a draft body of knowledge matches what we do on a daily basis. So what is that, and what are those skills? So this diagram represents the ProFM body of knowledge, and it defines the knowledge, skills, and abilities for FMs today and into the future. So this was developed in 2017, revalidated this past year. I guess we're in 2022 now. So it was 2021, we revalidated this survey to make sure it's still aligned with what was happening out there. And the way this is structured is it's structured into 4 functional FM knowledge areas of asset management, risk management, business management, and operations and maintenance. Within each one of those functional areas, there's 4 to 6 topic areas that are addressed within those. So those are all addressed within the program. Then, and Jesse also talked about this a little bit earlier, so it's not only those hard technical skills, if you will, but it's also these soft skills. So things that you need to consider each time you look to deliver a solution. So there's 5 what we call cross-functional competencies. Really think of those as those soft skills. Communication, sustainability, quality, innovation, and collaboration. So that's a factor each time you look to deliver a solution. The body of knowledge is structured such that no topic stands alone here. It's a very integrated and holistic view into what a facility manager does on a daily basis. So that is the ProFM body of knowledge. We've got more information about that, and I will tell you as we go through here, our website is a great resource with a bunch of free tools out there. This training outlook survey that we're referencing back and getting data from, this body of knowledge, there's a detailed body of knowledge document out there. So there's a lot of resources out there. In most cases, we would have a lot of that at our booth, but our booth didn't actually show up yesterday. And we're not sure exactly where that is. So you're just going to have to come and talk to us, and and we'll help you through that, and we'll point you to the right spot on the website. So it's always something, right? Okay, so back to the panel. So why do facility managers at all career stages need a holistic view of FM? And I'll start with Jesse on this one.
Because FM touches every department in the company.
Okay.
I mean, at the end of the day, no matter what your company does, no matter who is in your buildings, no matter what industry your company performs at, FM is involved. In my role, I would say 60 to 70% of the tasks I do are interdepartmental. If you go look at my cubicle, there's the honorary accounting department badge, there's the honorary IT badge, there's the honorary HR, please don't come visit us again badge. There is every department in our company is somebody that we work with in partnership. And in order to put facilities in the spot it needs to be to succeed and enhance the success of the company, you have to be able to speak to all those different departments. You have to be able to see all those different roles and perspectives. And you have to be able to relate the work you do and the value you bring to the priorities and the knowledge and the experience and the needs of each individual department. You can't do that if you're looking at your industry in a tunnel. You have to be able to be a universal translator for operations. That requires a very broad set of skills.
All right, good deal. John?
I think whenever you consider your responsibilities in the role that you're in, you need to know where you are, you need to understand where you want to go, and you can't forget where you've been. I think that's very important. because FM as a whole has a lot of different silos, if you will, a lot of different competencies, right? A lot of different services. And depending on where you are from a career perspective, you need to understand why something's being done, whether it be above you, whether it be at your level, or whether it be the folks that are delivering the service right for you. So I think it's very important to have that 360 view.
All right, good. Eileen?
I think if you're committed to the facility management industry, you're all in. And what you can do is just keep looking at how it's changing and evolving and the role you have to play. And it's great to be able to pass on your knowledge and wisdom. I think we've all had the experience of bringing our colleagues to a conference they haven't been to before, and you can see how they light up once they kind of meet other facility managers and once they come to sessions like this and begin to understand, oh, a lot of people are dealing with this. It's not that I didn't know. A lot of people don't know about these aspects of facilities management. So anything you can do to bring them to professional events and chapters and associations that are operating in your region or your city, and then bring them to 1 or 2 annual conferences so they get depth and breadth of exposure. You're doing it for yourself, but then you're doing it for the next generation in facility management. And you would actually go back to your employers and say, I went to that conference, this is what I found out. Here's what we're not doing right, or here's an area for improvement. And then, of course, the vendors you get to meet on the show floor can be eye-opening. All the conferences I went to this year in the trade shows, the amount of technology that has entered the facility management profession, I think all the show floors have turned over 30% or more of new vendors coming in to service this industry. So when new vendors look at us and come to our conferences and say, you're the people in the room I need to talk to, that tells you you're going to see people on that show floor that you never saw before if you've come to this conference in the past. I'm meeting companies I had no idea they existed, what they do, and it's eye-opening.
Yeah.
Can I
go ahead,
add one
John.
thing to that, Randy?
Yep.
So give you an example with opportunities that you need to give your staff. Mentioned earlier how we reinvented janitorial services at one site. The company that we partnered with to do a lot of that, they're headquartered out of Atlanta, and they actually sit at Atlanta Hartsfield Airport. They fully deployed their technology there. So I had been down there, met with their CEO, took a look at the technology, watched it, in play with different service providers at that airport. And what I did when I knew, and I had alignment from our leadership that we were going to push this out, I went and called a few of my janitorial team in, 2 supervisors, my janitorial manager, and I said, hey, guess where you're going to go next week? You're going to Atlanta Airport. You're going to go meet with Trax, Tracy, and her team, and I want you to take a look at this technology. I want you to get a chance to ask some questions to the folks that are doing the work. I got it set up for you. So the reason I tell you that, Eileen just mentioned sending your staff to events like this. Events like this are great, but also think through how you can go and show them what else is going on in industry. Let them talk to their peers. Let them be part of the process. That experience that I just mentioned to you that our employees had to go to Atlanta Airport, for some of them, they came up and told me it's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. And here's what it did. They were bought in, 110%. They got to watch this work. They got to talk to other people. And, that really, to me, is pivotal whenever you look at getting employee engagement. So it's just something to think about in a real-world example of how you can do that.
Great. Thanks, John. So safe to say that the technology's cool, but it's all about the people,
It is.
right?
Yep.
Yeah, all about the people. Okay, so what I'd like to do is get back to the survey, back to the 2022 Training Outlook Survey, and talk about training priorities for managers and staff. So the way the survey was structured and the way we got responses back was in really 3 buckets. So managers were training priorities for themselves, managers training priorities for their staff, and then FM staff and their training priorities for themselves. And within each one of these buckets that's outlined on this slide, you see the top 5 in each one of those areas. So, but you'll also see that there is some shared, but there's some that are not aligned between the three buckets of information, which is kind of interesting. So if you look at managers and what they're looking for on behalf of themselves as strategic planning and project management, in unison with managers on behalf of their staff, project management and strategic planning, and then FM staff. So those are the overlaps, those are the shared priorities between those three buckets. Then uniquely, so what was unique within each one of those areas? So environmental health and safety for managers, for themselves, but then on behalf of their staff, okay? So leadership skills was the number 2 priority for managers as they think about training their staff. And then strategic planning and communication. And then for staff, one unique opportunity here was utility management. So not necessarily in alignment, and I think maybe the bucket to focus on here is the one in the middle, where managers say on behalf of the staff, here's what I think, and then here's what the staff said, right? So back to that core competency or that cross-functional competency of communication and getting feedback from your folks will be important. So if we go back to the panel, and we'll start with John on this one. So why do you think these particular topics top the list in 2022? And then we'll follow that up and ask the why. So why is there a difference in priorities between staff versus managers?
I think if you consider everything that we've been through as FMers, right, during COVID, it doesn't surprise me that I see a few of the top priorities on that list, especially the compliance piece of it, right, and HS&E. Outside of that, I also think that the reason there's a difference in priorities between staff and managers is because of each individual group's pain points. If you think about what you're getting leaned on to deliver and where your focus is, that's a bit different perhaps than some of your staff. So I think it has to do with where the pain points are of the individual groups. And then, looping back to the particular topics overall where there's some consistency, I just think that's indicative of, again, what we've been through recently and where the industry is heading.
Great. Eileen?
The staff had probably a longer view of things that they needed more training on. They had a sense of where their weaknesses were. But maybe it wasn't as apparent until we went through the process of people not being at their facility all the time and managing people who were some at home and some in the office. I mean, some of you have situations like John had where they never shut down. Things didn't stop. It just became even a greater role for facilities to take on. And then those who are managing, especially in the big cities where people haven't come back into the office buildings, staff have different training responsibilities that things they need help on, and managers are having to answer to real estate management about what they're going to do about the structure of how and where people work. And if there is a long view in some places that they're not going to be bringing people back into the office every day, then you look at the facility staff and say, when people are here, their engagement has to be at such a very high level. What can we do about the physical space? What do we do about the environment people live in every day that make them want to be here? So you're going to have to train up your facility staff to prepare to be more engaged and almost hyper-responsive, because the fuse has gotten short, where employees are coming back in and they're like, well, you told me to come back to the office, right? So where's this and where's this, and this is what I need if I'm going to be coming to the office. So there's been a shift in expectations of, if I'm physically reporting to a building, this is everything I want, and if it's not there, I'm not coming in. I mean, it's incredible, but this is part of all the other industries as well, where the employees have the power. The employees are in a position to push back on expectations. And if the facilities are an area they can go to and say, it's not meeting my needs, I can work better someplace else and still do the job for you, that's a hurdle that involves all levels of management, and it involves the facility staff. If a company's made the strategic decision that they want people physically at a specialized, purpose-driven workplace.
All right, great. Jesse?
When I look at these shared priorities, what I see is, following on what you mentioned earlier, that I see managers understanding that they need to train their staff up. I see them focusing, when I see leadership skills, I see emergency management, strategic project management. That tells me that managers are recognizing their staff need to be trained up. You want to be able to have your lowest level make those decisions, feel empowered and enabled to make those decisions. But when I look at what the FM training priorities for themselves, what the staff say for themselves, and I see the different priorities and the different ranking of those priorities, that tells me that the FM staff are thinking about the training I need to solve the problem you've given me right now. I'm not surprised that project management's at the top, because if you weren't a project manager in FM before COVID, you are now. And hopefully they were kind enough to tell you what project you were managing before they dropped it on your site. But when I look at the dichotomy of the ranking of these, what I do see is that there's still a gap in communication. There's a gap in communication between the managers and their staff saying, here's what I see for you to grow you from a career perspective, and what the staff are saying, here's what I need now to succeed for you as an employee.
So let's talk about impact. And I'm going to go back to you folks and do another poll question here. So how many of you in the audience here have earned a professional credential or qualification? All right. Okay. So back to the survey. So what the survey told us is 82% of staff would pursue a credential if their employer provided financial support for that. Okay. So why would we do that? So what are the benefits of that? So what managers say is, increase confidence and capability. So it's about that, and then better job performance. And then employees also say, increase confidence, increase credibility, advance in your career, being able to move up, and better job performance. So I'm going to go back to the panel here, and we're going to ask about that. So for organizations that are focused on ROI, do these benefits justify an investment in training? We'll start with John on this one.
To me, I don't even think you need to do the math. I mean, if you consider the cost when an employee turns over, whether it be a facility director, operations manager, frontline employee, and the amount of time that you then need to reinvest in a new employee, and it's fact that empowering your folks, training your folks helps retention. Why would you not do that? It's not a matter of if you can afford to pay for training, can you not afford to pay for it? You can't.
Great. Jesse?
Yeah, the amount of tribal knowledge that walks out of the door when you lose an employee is never quantified while they're there, but you figure it out very quickly when they're gone. And the fact that there are companies who don't recognize the need to invest in their employees is a little mind-boggling when you figure how much we do for the companies that we work for. Yeah, absolutely there's an ROI for training. Absolutely there is a need to invest in your employees, not only to show them that they have value and that their department has value, but I mean, facilities is always asked to do more with less. And you can only solve that increased demand with so much technology, with so many tools, with so many processes, if you don't have the people trained in the technology able to develop, pressure test, and define and implement those processes. And if you don't have people who have the time to learn the tools you've given them. So if you increase the training and the competence and the confidence of your people, then the ability to roll out those other necessary tools to succeed also progresses faster. There's an exponential value to it.
Great. Thanks, Jesse. Eileen?
So for some organizations, it just might be worthwhile to do some informal research to find out how other departments are handling training. Speak to as facility managers who are in leadership positions, find out what training that HR gets every year, what the accounting department gets, what the core company's product area, what do the product managers get. So that gives you something to go back with and say there's a reason facility management also needs this level of training. And for one of the best reasons is that the confidence, and much of facility management, because it's contract-based, and you sign contracts with these outside organizations to come in, it's important that the people who are internal in the company understand what the performance expectations are of that contract, and that the facilities people can really give the right instructions to the people who are the contract holders. They need the knowledge to know that when you as a company signed the contract, that they can manage that contract. Now, a lot of people who don't have the facilities knowledge are left in an embarrassing position of not really knowing what their service provider is doing, or they got a sense that something's not quite right, but they don't know how to manage it because it's perceived that the service provider is in charge of all that. But no, you are the facility manager. You are in charge of how that contract runs. And that can save a company hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars if you have an internal manager who's well trained to manage the contractors. So right there, there's a lot of bottom line payoff for training facility managers.
All right, thanks, Eileen. So we're going to move into questions, but before we do that, I think these guys deserve a round of applause. These rock stars sitting up here in the panel. They certainly make my job, my role in this, pretty easy. So what questions do you folks have?
How do
take
we
that one?
think onboarding training impacts retention? Meaning a well-developed onboarding program for your new staff? How many companies have a well-developed onboarding program for their new staff? Okay.
Yeah, just a few.
Yeah.
I think there's two parts to that, right? So the onboarding, to me, the first day, the first hour, one of your new employees walks into your facility is really important. You know, I pivoted how we handle this a bit. We start with general orientation for the site, and then we have a lunch. And the lunch is with the entire team, the management team and those employees, regardless if they're a supervisor, frontline employee, you name it, right? You got to make them feel welcome, and then you have to let them know that you do have a plan. You have a plan to train them. Here's what it's going to look like. This is the duration of it. And again, it doesn't matter whether it's a janitor, a security officer, an HVAC tech, or an operations manager, facility director. You have to have a plan. You really do. And I think that makes a huge difference in retention. I've watched where my organization has botched that before, where we didn't put the human part of it in up front, and it didn't work. You know, it's not just that technical on-the-job training. It's making them feel part of the organization, part of the team.
Part of the solution.
Great. Other questions?
Well, I'm not sure we answered your question quite exactly, though, how it affects retention. And the reason I asked how many companies have a well-developed onboarding program is because one of the things I see is that there's not always a clear understanding. Do you onboard your frontline worker the same as you onboard your manager? Do you onboard your electrician the same way you onboard your HVAC technician? And I think if you start asking yourself those questions, you're going to get too technical. You're going to devalue the underlying foundational principle of having a valuable employee, which is you've hired this person for their skills, but what you need to bring them into is that human aspect. To follow on what you said, I can't answer your question because I'm writing the onboarding program for my company. We didn't have one. I kind of came in, I got a laptop, I got a phone, and then 10 minutes later, I got dispatched to a problem down the hall in a building I had never been in. So I don't know that I can answer that question for you. But having that onboarding program, developing it, connecting with other companies that have well-developed programs and finding what is working in the industry is incredibly important, because you want to let your staff know they're here to be part of the solution. They are here to invest in the success of that company. And in order to show them that without telling them that, from day one, you show them you're investing in the success of them as an employee. And yeah, I think you're definitely going to get better retention rates. I say that because the driving factor for my career shift wasn't necessarily the compensation difference. There wasn't that much compensation difference in my job offers. It was the conversation and the way that conversation was held. It was, our employees are important. Our people are our best resource. This industry, this department is foundational to the success and continuance of our business operations. And you coming onto that team and being part of that team are enabling the success of the team and everyone that will benefit from the work you do in our company.
Okay, any other questions?
Because our profession is not as defined as, say, engineering or pharmacist or accounting. I bet everyone in this room has probably arrived here at a very unique path. But among facility managers who are entering the profession, because I'm like, maybe you in the middle, I'll put other two, but I've been in it for about 25 years as well, and it's a very different climate today than it was when I came into technology and everything. But when you look at the candidates that are coming in at the entry level, the ones who are succeeding and growing in the company, are there any common denominators between whether it's formal education, career paths, whether it's military, trade school, that is preparing effective facility?
I think it varies with the role that the individuals are in at the time, and here's what I mean by that. I find that for facility directors, which to me typically means someone that has comprehensive service line responsibility, whether it be in healthcare, whether it be in manufacturing, you name it. I find individuals that have military training in a background have a good foundation. And I also find outside of that, people that communicate well, are personable, and have good project management skills do well. I think those are core for that facility director level. I also think, though, that a lot of those skills can be learnt internally if you have a well-run operation. And like I mentioned here a few times, I've been spending a lot more effort on that internal development of individuals, because there's only so many candidates that are out there that have some of the backgrounds that I mentioned, and if you solely try to find someone external, you're never going to meet your need. And the other part is that I've also learned, your staff watch folks be promoted, and there is nothing more powerful whenever you see, or your staff sees, a frontline employee that moves up to supervisor, to manager, and to that director level. So I think it's a hybrid approach of how you manage that, but generally, depending on the level, I think that determines the success of individuals with their different backgrounds.
Yeah.
I think my perspective on it is work ethic. You can teach technical skills to a lot of people if they have the right work ethic, if they have the right mentality. In my experience, if they don't have the right work ethic, technical skills are only going to take them so far. Because we are not so defined as an industry, if you take 3 people that have facility manager as their job title and ask them what they do, I bet you're going to get 3 different jobs. However, there's a matrix of skills, ability, and knowledge. And whenever you're looking to fill a role, each role is going to be a very dynamic mix of those skills, knowledge, and abilities, right? You're never going to find that perfect person that brings everything that you need to the table, because if they're out there, they're probably already employed, right? So in my experience, I would say find someone who has the closest mix, who has a very good work ethic, and is trainable, right? You're coming into this industry. I came from a background in plumbing. So my first job at 15 was a plumber's apprentice for commercial plumbing. Let me tell you how surprising that was to managers when I stepped out of the box truck at 16 and they went, "Is there a camera? Like, what are you doing here?" 99% of what I've learned in the FM industry, I learned through the work that I did. And I made it very important to myself as an employee that I learn everything I could possibly learn in any role I was given.
Great, thanks everybody. So we have 1 minute, so we need to wrap this up, do our drawing. I'm going to remind you, we're in booth 214. You can learn more about the body of knowledge. You can learn about the program that rides on top of that body of knowledge, that trains people in each one of these 24 topics. If you don't get a chance to see us, profmi.org, great resource for a bunch of resources. So There's a great resource out there that allows you to assess yourself. And these are all free. These are all free resources. Assess yourself against the current ProFM body of knowledge. It's called Map Your Gap. We have not body knowledge document. Typically, if our crate would have shown up with our booth, we would have that for you here printed and available. We might have a couple, right?
I have a copy I can
And
share.
then we've got this full survey results, the 2022 Training Outlook Survey. That's available for you out there free. And then and you might find some of the people sitting on this panel in some of these documents that you download with great pictures of them in that. And then last but not least, we have an ROI document. So download the ROI of training ebook. So that helps you justify this to your bosses.